Hello everyone, Debra Lee here with another That's Life message for daily living. Today's message will be on why women don't trust the church with divorce. So this will be a two-parter. The first part will be about the church language, and the second part will be about how to help a friend heal from divorce with lots of help guides for you and for them. And as always, if you would like to receive the transcript, reach out through my website. So the divorce rate for couples who rarely attend church is the same as, and in some cases higher than, the divorce rate for unchurched couples. After my first book had been out for a while, I found that women felt that they could be very open with me about sharing personal things that had happened in their own lives. Some were very painful experiences, leaving many scars for each person to live with, both physically and mentally. One of the most common topics discussed was divorce and its impact on their lives. In some cases, I had known the person for quite some time, and I would never have guessed that they had even lived through a messy, very painful, and in some cases, a dangerous divorce. I found through these conversations that most women had never told anyone in their current church that they had even had a divorce in their past. One woman had found out that her husband was living a double life in another state with a wife, kiddos, the whole works. He is currently spending time in prison. Another woman's husband had committed some horrific crimes, and through the investigations, an affair was revealed that he had been having, and he is now in prison for the rest of his life. One woman was abandoned by her husband, no reason given at all, and she was left with 10 children to raise on her own. He hadn't taken up with anyone else. He lived in the same town, but he never took any further responsibilities for his family. All three women are great Christian women who experienced unexpected circumstances. They thought they had married correctly. They thought they had followed the rules. They thought they were living right. All three of these women were blindsided by the events that had taken place. And what makes this even worse for all of them is that they thought that they had no one in the church to help them get through the hurt and the pain. The question is why? Why was the church not a place for healing? As they reported, immediately they were judged and shunned by those attending their church. They were looked down upon and were made to feel shame and less than. They were outcasts in some cases. They could feel the sting of being stared at. They were told about the rumors. They knew how people were talking about them, and some experienced the feeling of being pitied to death by others. Parishioners and pastors would say insensitive things like, "What did you do wrong? You must not have loved him good enough. You should never divorce. Now go back in there and make it work somehow." Or, "Christ must not have been in your marriage." These insults only heaped onto the pain. One woman whom I knew had been abandoned and never divorced her husband for fear of what the church would do to her. If there were no paper trail or any legal actions towards a divorce, she would be allowed to stay in the church and not be kicked out. She found herself a single mom with no means of support and had a busload of children to raise without the help of child support. You see, no court actions, no child support. The church was poor and didn't really offer her much help in raising her children. She never saw her husband again, and 20 years later, she finally became a single person because he had passed away. Her pain ran deeply, betrayal by her husband, and basically betrayal by her church. So let's look at some of the church language that's out there today. Many women never return to church after a divorce because they cannot trust the male authorities. As history shows, male authorities have, for many decades and centuries, used language that is very damaging and unsupportive for women, especially towards women who are leaving a marriage because of violence. The scripture only lists 2 reasons for divorce: abandonment and adultery, and it doesn't specifically say anything about divorcing for reasons of abuse. However, the Bible is full of scriptures on how to care for, protect, and properly love one another. There are other scriptures to instruct husbands on how to love their wives. Unfortunately, scriptures are often misused and abused by husbands, and some of the church's interpretations have been used for abuse purposes as well. So I did some homework. It's been a few years back, and I have a list of some languages used within some of the churches concerning abuse. And I'm just going to label them Church 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on instead of giving away their names. But Church 1 says spousal abuse should be dealt with by temporary separation and church marriage counseling designed to bring about reconciliation between the couple. But to qualify for that separation, your spouse must be in the habit of beating you regularly and not to be simply someone who grabbed you once. So how many beatings would one have to take place in order to qualify as regular? So Church 2 gives an unremitting message to women of submission, 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 so that they will not be women who will want to rule over men. This church tells couples to attend joint marriage counseling under lay ministry leaders with no specific training for abuse survivors, offering a prescription of submission and headship, often telling women to learn to submit better. Church 3. Women often bring abuse on themselves by refusing to submit. Submission is so essential to God's plan that it must be followed even to the point of allowing abuse. When God puts you in subjection to a man whom he knows is going to cause you to suffer, it is with the understanding that you are obeying God by enduring the wrongful suffering. Okay, Church 4. Leave while the heat is on, but only with the intention of returning to the marriage when the violence has cooled. So everybody with a lick of sense knows that in a violent marriage, the heat is never off. Everything can be fine 1 minute and the next minute you're dead. Okay, Church 5. Divorces will be treated as either an old pre-conversion sin, if it happened before they were saved or forgiven, as a repented sin, if it happened post-salvation. But the mature Christians must admit that their divorce was more for their own selfishness than any other reason. Okay, Church 6 teaches that women are the completer of men, and that therefore God created wives for the sole purpose of completing their husbands. Since the wife's job is to complete the husband wherever he is incomplete, wives are supposed to know what he wants and needs. In other words, it's your fault if you get beaten for not knowing what he needs. Okay, many churches, I found this. The issues of submission always arises in church discussions of domestic violence, subtly reminding women of their duty to maintain a submissive attitude towards their husbands, and that wifely non-submission is the cause of domestic abuse. In all these cases, there is undue emphasis on female submission and too little emphasis on the husband's duty to protectively lead his wife. Research has found that Christian women often stay in abusive situations several years longer than secular abused women because they are devout believers and are more bound by their desires to obey God and do not want to displease Him in any way. Christian victims put an internal pressure on themselves to stay, submit, pray, forgive, and forget the previous abuse because they would be holding unforgiveness if they didn't. They have a scriptural dilemma because of how they were taught to believe. The church is to be the vital agent in the restoration and healing of the divorced person. Unfortunately, many churches are ill-equipped to deal with the deep pain brought into a divorced person's life. Divorced people need to be accepted and loved. Many of them have faced rejection in their marriages by mates who left them for someone else. They wonder if they are good enough to be loved by anybody. They lose their self-worth, self-esteem, and self-value. Love and acceptance will help upset these feelings. Accepting a divorced person doesn't mean you accept divorce. Jesus hates sin, but he loves people and sinners. We must make this distinction as we work with divorced people and walk with them through the healing processes. We need to love them through the tough stuff. Okay, this is the end of part 1, so thanks for listening, everyone. This topic will continue with the next post with part 2, and it's going to have some helpful aids for how to heal from divorce for you as a friend and the person going through the divorce. So don't forget to like, comment, and share, and subscribe to stay connected. Until next time, be blessed, everyone.